Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Fatherhood and Reentry, Engaging Fathers Post-Release. My name is Roneen Davis, and I am a Grantee Technical Assistance Manager at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. Before we begin, I have a couple of technical notes. If you encounter connection or audio problems during this webinar, please call WebEx Technical Support at 1-866-229-3239. Again, it's 1-866-229-3239. We'll also put that number up on the chat box on the bottom right of your screen. Unfortunately, there are some connection issues we may not be able to resolve during the webinar. However, we are recording today's webinar, and it will be posted on our website along with a copy of the slides used in today's presentation. Everyone who registered for the webinar will receive an email as soon as the webinar is available on our website. You may also check the website directly at csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC. At the end of today's webinar, we will have time for questions from the audience. To ask a question, please enter it in the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can ask questions at any point during the webinar and are encouraged to do so, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible before we end today. To get started, I want to give a quick overview of the Justice Center. The Justice Center is a national nonprofit organization that serves policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels from all branches of government. Staff provides practical, nonpartisan advice and evidence-based, consensus-driven strategies to increase public safety and strengthen communities. You can find our website at csgjusticecenter.org and can follow us on Twitter at CSGJC. In addition to serving policymakers, the Justice Center provides technical assistance to all Second Chance Act grantees through the National Reentry Resource Center, which is funded through the Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance. I oversee the Community Initiatives portfolio, which provides technical assistance to all Second Chance Act grant programs awarded to nonprofit and faith-based agencies focused on mentoring adults in reentry, mentoring young fathers and mothers in reentry, and supporting children and families of incarcerated parents. We are constantly adding new content and resources to our website, and we send out a monthly newsletter that provides information about the latest research, funding opportunities, distance learning events, and other news about reentry. We encourage everyone who hasn't done so already to sign up for the newsletter by going to csgjusticecenter.org/subscribe. The newsletter highlights Second Chance Act grantees, provides information on new publications and resources, as well as updates for recipients on the latest reentry funding opportunities, trainings, and relevant news. Today's webinar is the second in a series of webinars focused on fathers and reentry. Joining me today is Erik Vecere, Vice President of Program Support for the National Fatherhood Initiative, who will be leading the presentation today. Mr. Vecere and I, through our work with fatherhood programs around the country, identified three key areas that most programs found challenging. These include the focus of the first webinar, Engaging with Families While the Father is Incarcerated, which took place last month and is available on our website. The other topics include today's presentation on engaging and retaining fathers in your program after they have been released, and lastly, program sustainability. Based on the need of the programs we serve, additional topics may be identified for future webinars, such as innovative child support partnerships, some of which will be touched on today. You can find these and all of our other webinars at csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC/webinars, which is up on the screen. As I mentioned before, this webinar came about because it was an issue we saw with many of the grant programs we serve. Many programs, whether they are reentry focused or not, struggle to keep participants engaged. One benefit of a reentry program is if you're able to incorporate pre-release services, you're often working with a captive audience, and it gives practitioners a chance to build a relationship. However, once released, there are a number of barriers individuals face as they re-enter their communities that could inhibit their involvement in a fatherhood program. What I have seen from the programs I work with is a number of potential logistical barriers, such as transportation to and from the programming, as well as the fact that many fathers have out-of-date, inaccurate, or changing contact information, which of course makes it difficult to re-engage them. In most cases, fathers are also focused on other needs, such as finding housing or employment, and do not see fatherhood, parenting, or healthy relationship services as a priority or something they are able or even interested in dedicating time to. And with all the requirements often put on someone who has just left incarceration, such as probation and or parole appointments, treatment requirements, and other conditions of release, a fatherhood program may appear as just another place or person to report to, yet another burden on their time. In addition to these, we have found significant differences when working with programs that serve a population returning from jail versus prison. In prison, it is oftentimes easier to build a relationship, as you are working with individuals often working with individuals with a set release date, or at least an idea of when the release date will be, and you can more or less ensure consistent attendance, as this is a sentenced population. In jails, there is usually a lack of consistency. There are shorter periods of stay, individuals may be pre-adjudicated, awaiting sentencing, etc. It's difficult to build relationships when someone may be released or transferred any day. Though this webinar won't be able to address every issue, Mr. Vecere and I have identified some strategies that have worked for different programs around the country to further the discussions of how to keep fathers engaged after they have been released from jails and prisons. Mr. Vecere is joined today by Jordan Jeske, the Monterey, California Field Director for Prison Fellowship, and Hannah Gibson, the Corrections Program Administrator for the Kentucky Department of Corrections. As a reminder, throughout the webinar, we encourage you to submit questions in the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand corner of the WebEx screen. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Erik Vecere of the National Fatherhood Initiative. Erik, are you there? And just one moment, folks. We seem to be having some technical difficulties here. Oh, I apologize, everyone. So it looks like Erik's phone cut out for some reason. We're going to go ahead and give him a chance to call back in, but I'll go ahead and get things started while he does that. Just one moment here. All right, everyone. So this is, I'm going to try and do justice to Erik's first slide here about the National Fatherhood Initiative. The National Fatherhood Initiative is a transforming organization in communities by equipping them to intentionally and proactively engage fathers in their children's lives. NFI's vision is for every child to grow up with an involved, responsible, and committed father. And NFI has been involved in this work for quite some time. And it looks like Erik is back on. We're just going to go ahead and try and get him, make sure his audio is working so he can do his slides more justice than I can. All right, Erik, are you there? All right, I apologize, everyone. Looks like we're still struggling with some technical issues on our end here. So Erik, when your phone is, or if you can jump in at any point, I'll go ahead and keep going, and let me know if you have, let me know when you're able to jump back in. All right, so as I mentioned before, there are a number of barriers that fathers are facing when they're returning from incarceration. So the two buckets that Erik and I identified of how to address these issues are leveraging post-release issues that pertain to fathers in reentry programs and additional strategies. Those additional strategies are the ones that aren't necessarily pertaining to the specific barriers that they face when they return. But in terms of those barriers, they might include child support payments, as I mentioned before, housing issues, and employment concerns. As is the case, we have a representative from the Prison Fellowship here who will talk about how they've used employment to keep fathers engaged. The additional strategies include utilizing the alumni from either your program or similar programs, and partnering with probation and parole as a way to support the attendance of the fathers that are in your program. So speaking specifically about child support, if there is a way for your program to provide support around arrearage forgiveness or some other kind of child support incentive, that is one way to keep fathers engaged in your program. One of the biggest barriers when someone is returning from incarceration is that there are a lot of fees, fines, and various financial issues. One example that Erik had pulled from, and I apologize because I don't know that I can do do it justice the way he could, but is the Parental Obligation Pilot Project, which is out of the Mid-Iowa. It's a partnership between the Mid-Iowa Community Action, the YMCA of Marshalltown, the Wellmark YMCA, and Iowa Child Support Recovery. It provides education and training to fathers, and fathers can have up to 80% of their child support arrearages forgiven. Partnerships with child support agencies are so key to fatherhood work, and one of the big reasons for that is, in addition to educating fathers on the child support system when they may not have all that information, it can also help alleviate some of the barriers that having all of these child support payments backed up, what those barriers might be. This is one example that unfortunately I don't know as much about, but I can speak to. One of our Second Chance Act grantees, who is a young fatherhood Second Chance Act grantee out of the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, has partnered with their local child support office, and they've agreed, and this is in in South Dakota, and the child support office there has agreed to put a hold on the child support payments for any father participating in their program. So it's about, I believe, a 6-week program. They are not obligated to pay any of their child support during that time as long as they are enrolled in the program. And ideally during that time, they're now building up more skills that will help them find better jobs. They're possibly, if they already have a job, able to save up some money, and then they're able, when the child support payments pick up again, they're able to pay something, even if they're not able to pay the full amount. Obviously, this is a great incentive for the fathers because they're not having to be bogged down by payments, and by being in the program, that's what triggers this particular incentive. Obviously, this is not something that is possible in every jurisdiction. It's something that you have to work out with your local child support office. But I can say that the National Child Support Office, the federal office that's under the Department of Health and Human Services, has been working really hard to push these innovative partnerships between fatherhood programs, reentry programs, and local child support offices. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to your office and see if there are some possibilities for partnerships. Just as a note, it looks like Erik is attempting to call back in again, so we're going to see if he's able to join us and pick up where I left off. Erik, are you there?
Yes, I lost internet connection. I'm actually calling in on my cell phone, but it looks like I can see the screen. So
okay.
yeah.
And we can hear you. So just to give you an update, and I'm happy to move the slides if we need to. I talked very briefly about your organization, but I told the group I probably didn't do it justice, and read the slide on child support, but I did talk about one of our Second Chance Act grantees that has a really good partnership with child support, where they have been able to suspend payments while they're in the program for 6 weeks before payments pick up again. So that's kind of where we left off if you want to take it from there.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Hopefully things will remain a little smoother on my connection here. But yeah, the one thing that I've been seeing more examples of programs around the country are around this child support arrearage forgiveness incentive. And there are a number of programs that are finding ways to address the child support arrearage issues that most fathers face after incarceration. And as all of you know, it's not unusual for fathers to be thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars in the arrears upon release. And that contributes to their frustration that can lead to recidivism, certainly something we're all trying to combat. One example of an initiative that is doing a great job addressing this issue while keeping dads engaged in programs and services post-release is the Parental Obligation Pilot Project, otherwise known as POP. And it's a partnership between the Mid-Iowa Community Action, the YMCA of Marshalltown, the Wellmark YMCA, and Iowa Child Support Recovery. And with this program, participants in POP can have part of the balance owed to the state satisfied if they pay their full current child support obligation consecutively for 6, 12, and 24 months after the completion of NFI's 24/7 DAD course. Now, this is a pilot program, and it's outlined in the Iowa Code, which allows the Mid-Iowa Community Action to provide education and training to the fathers. In addition to reducing their debt owed to the state, fathers may also receive a free family YMCA membership for 4 months to one of the YMCAs listed there. The Iowa Child Support Recovery handles all of the approvals, the communication with the fathers, and monitoring of the participation. Once the Mid-Iowa Community Action has helped the father apply for the project, their role is to support the father to continue to meet his child support obligations. And the amounts of child support forgiveness are pretty significant. They're 15% of state-owed back support at 6 months, but if they get to 12 months, it jumps to 35%, and then a whopping 80% at 24 months. So they can get up to 80% of their child support arrears forgiven. And the satisfactions are earned by paying their entire monthly obligation without missing payments for the time they're earning satisfaction. So because they've tied their local fatherhood programs and services into the dad's ability to unlock this great incentive, they've been able to keep many more dads engaged on the post-release side. So, Roneen, I don't know if you want to forward that. There we go. So the first 72 hours after release are decisive for fathers because they represent the first opportunity for the fathers to make the choices that will determine whether they will succeed with reentry. As I'm sure you're all aware, fathers typically don't find much help in navigating the way to the services for housing needed to make reentry a success. For that reason, housing provides another great opportunity, in addition to the child support issue, to keep fathers engaged in services post-release. One example is this U-Count family home in Georgetown, Delaware. And this is a 3-quarter recovery house with a focus on dads in recovery. 3-quarter recovery houses are a strong and less expensive alternative to the traditional halfway house. They're a self-run and financially self-supported rented house that are protected under the Federal Housing Act. So the typical resident for this program is homeless or comes from prison or a rehabilitation program, and many of them want to reunify with his children. It's also informed by the Oxford House model, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with that, but these programs encourage sobriety, accountability, and they provide housing in a good neighborhood, which is also another thing that they really work on is trying to change the environment of the dads that are going through the programs so that they can break out of some of their defaults that led them into those problems in the first place. Fathers are required to participate in the 24/7 DAD program, and UCount Family Home has a special room that dads can use for child visitation that takes place overnight or during the day. So you might want to investigate whether there are similar housing programs in your community. Maybe you've already done that, but maybe dig a little bit deeper, see if you can partner with and possibly integrate your fatherhood programs and services as a requirement into those kinds of programs as well. Research also shows that an unemployed father is 3 times more likely to return to prison than an employed father. So this is yet another great area to target when it comes to keeping dads engaged post-release. So I'm going to turn it over to Jordan with Prison Fellowship so that he can talk about some things they've been doing to engage dads around employment.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay. So good afternoon. My name is Jordan Jeske, and I work with Prison Fellowship as a field director on the Central Coast of California. My job is to implement Prison Fellowship programming in the institutions that I oversee, which is in Salinas Valley State Prison and Soledad CTF. When I started with Prison Fellowship nearly 2 years ago, we only had 2 active programs going on. Today, we have a total of 6 active programs up and running between both CTF and Salinas Valley. We have around 20 volunteers that come in faithfully every week to help facilitate these programs. Today, we're helping around 300 inmates to lead better lives and make healthier choices. We offer 3 major programs for our students. First being our parenting course called Inside Out Dads, which you are all familiar with. That was started by the NFI. In this class, we help teach fathers how to be dads while they're incarcerated and then also when they get out and go back home. We teach them the fundamentals of fatherhood and the importance of a role a father has in their children's lives. Secondly, we offer a pre-release course called SOAR, which stands for Stepping Out, Approved, and Renewed. This is a 2-year course that prepares men and women for their release back into their communities. The majority of my students that I work with have been incarcerated for some 25, 30 to 40 years. So you can imagine how much things have changed since they've been locked up. So we do our best to help them with the basics, from filling out employment applications to doing their resumes to how to fill out checkbooks, also to help develop them with life skills, and most importantly, we help to place them in a solid reentry home when they're able to be released. Now, lastly, we offer the TUMI program, which stands for the Urban Ministry Institute. This is our 4-year seminary-level course, and it's equivalent to a master's degree in theology. It was created by Dr. Don Davis, that's a part of World Impact. So in this program, we're teaching these men systematic theology and doctrine, but most of all, it's considered to be our leadership development course. We're raising up leaders within the prisons that teach them how to communicate the Word of God effectively and then send them back into their urban communities to be spiritual leaders and to help change the atmosphere of the communities. TUMI is mostly funded by a partnership that Prison Fellowship has. It's an organization called Serving California. Serving California actually provided a hefty check of around $2.2 million to get this material in all 33 prisons in California. I think as of right now, the TUMI program is in roughly about 28 prisons in California. On a side note, Serving California actually helps with funding for a handful of reentry homes in California, with the agreement that when our TUMI students are paroled, they will have a guaranteed bed space at either of those particular reentry homes. housing, and reentry homes, halfway houses, all play a huge role in the success of an individual getting out of prison. I believe that having some kind of structured living environment is one of the key necessities that is required for these particular individuals. The second necessity is what I was invited here on this webinar to speak about, and that's employment, specifically toward those that are getting out of prison. Researchers say that there's around 165,000 California inmates that get released every year. There's nearly 2.2 million people incarcerated in America right now. America makes up 5% of the world's population, but America alone makes up 25% of the world's incarcerated. In California, 65% of parolees go back within the first 3 years of being released. Nationally, 82% of parolees go back within that 3 years. California has built 22 prisons and built just one university since the 1980s. These statistics, these numbers can be overwhelming. In fact, when these men and women are released, they're not only faced with the scarcity of finding employment, but now they have to deal with having a criminal background, which now makes it twice as hard to find gainful employment. From my own personal experience, after serving 5 years in the prison system, I was given the opportunity to parole into a reentry home in Monterey, California. My first year out of prison was the most difficult for me. I feel that if it wasn't for a reentry home, I would have failed. I remember so clearly when I was released from prison on how stressful it was to find work. Going to interview after interview and filling out these endless applications, it was a nightmare. I finally landed this job being a valet, parking these expensive cars. And after 2 nights into it, I get a phone call from the manager. And he said, "Hey, Mr. Jeske, do you think you can stop by the office in the morning? I got some questions to ask you about your application." And so I already knew where this was going. So I get to his office in the morning, and he asked me about my felonies on my record, and I told him the truth. I told him, look, I made mistakes in the past. I'm trying to do the next right thing. All I'm asking is for a second chance. And he told me, well, unfortunately, Mr. Jeske, you can't work here anymore due to your felonies on your record. We can't have you park these expensive cars. So I remember leaving there just so discouraged, thinking to myself, if I can't even park cars for a living, what in the world am I going to do to support myself? But I didn't give up. I kept pressing forward, and I soon started to land these little side jobs here and there, and was eventually taught the landscaping trade by my friend's father. That's when I thought that I could start my own business. So in June of 2015, I started Cornerstone Hauling and Gardening. I started this company to give second chances to those that can't find work anywhere else due to their criminal backgrounds. Today we have 4 employees, which all have some kind of criminal background. We tend to hire those that are coming out of prison, or at times guys that are coming out of prison that are in programs such as Team Challenge or the Bridge program. And by my company interacting with these certain programs, we at times go there and share our personal testimonies, our stories with the other residents there, and they get so encouraged and see that change is possible. Because I feel that having a job plays such a crucial role in the success of reintegrating back into society. I developed other relationships with other business owners that have the same kind of mindset that I do. Just in case I'm unable to provide work for an individual, I have other resources that I can rely on, such as there's a welding company out here in Watsonville that is teaching men the trade of becoming master fabricators. Monterey Airbus is a transportation service in the Monterey area, dry cleaning businesses. Also, I developed a partnership with the GEO service. They have a local daily reporting center that also have different employers that are willing to hire men and women coming out of jail and prisons. This center also supplies counseling needs, different variety of classes, and has a computer lab where they can train participants on filling out applications and doing resumes. We just launched another company this year called Cornerstone Automotive Detailing. Matter of fact, the business was started by one of our employees. His name's Rick, and he just served 26 years in prison. And he was the first lifer to ever get a release date from Salinas Valley State Prison. Today, he helps oversee both my gardening company and his as well. Rick is also taking these online courses to become a certified paralegal, and he has also had speaking opportunities to speak to about 1,000 kids in the local schools out here about violence and gang involvement. And also this year, we started a nonprofit called Cornerstone New Hope Ministry. The goal behind this nonprofit is to someday open up a reentry home in Salinas, California. Also, as well as launching as many small businesses as we can to provide more work opportunities for parolees. In turn, these smaller businesses will be the main supporter of our reentry home. We desire to be a program that is self-sufficient and a program that gives back to our community. Now, lastly, the Second Prison Project. This Second Prison Project was founded by a prison fellowship employee by the name of Jesse Weiss. He started this campaign because he believes wholeheartedly, just as I do, that people deserve second chances, especially those that have paid their debt to society. You see, when individuals come out of prison, they're faced with a second prison within society. Even though, yes, they are free, they are still restricted in the things that they're able to do. For instance, as I mentioned earlier, finding employment can be a very difficult and discouraging because of a person's background. In most cases, you are very limited in what work that you're allowed to do. There are so many obstacles that hinder individuals who want to become productive members of society. Matter of fact, there's over 44,000 legal barriers that prohibit men and women from realizing their potential. These legal barriers range from access to professional licenses to limited opportunities to high-paying jobs within the government. In fact, in some states, a woman with a criminal record who later becomes a victim of a violent crime cannot receive state financial victim assistance based solely on her status as a person with a felony record. There are 65 million men and women in the U.S. That's 1 in 4 adults have some kind of criminal record. 65 million is a devastating number, and even though the majority of these men and women have satisfied the requirements of the criminal punishment, complete reintegration back into society is rarely, if ever, realized. The Second Prison Project envisions a world with no second prison, where men and women are valued and free to give back at their highest potential. It exists to expose the second prison and to unlock second chances. If you want more information about the Second Prison Project, they have an active Facebook page and also a website. So that's pretty much it for me. I just want to thank you for having me here today, and I hope that you found this information helpful. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me via Cornerstone Holly and Gardening Facebook page. And once again, thank you very much.
Okay, well thank you, Jordan, for that. That kind of wraps up the first section of our webinar presentation, which was looking at some of those issues that Ronin brought up at the very beginning that can be barriers for fathers, but can also provide us with great opportunities to engage them in programs and services post-release. So Jordan covered another dimension of that when it comes to looking at things around employment issues and partnering with other groups that are providing employment support, as well as some things that you might be able to do internally as part of your organization or your agency as well, that you can tie that into the ability to open up some of these other wants and needs that these dads may have, and connect that with some of your programs and services on keeping them engaged. So the second part of our presentation is going to just cover a few additional strategies, and there are 3 additional strategies you can consider to help increase father engagement post-release. The first one is to establish an alumni program. These programs provide a formal way for dads to be a part of something after they graduate from a fatherhood program. So if you have some things going pre-release, then you can kind of start that alumni on the pre-release side, but it can then spill over into the post-release side. And the first reason that it is helpful to start an alumni program is that it can keep fathers connected to a positive environment that facilitates continued growth as a father after they complete the program. The second reason is to provide a credible, trusted group of fathers who can recruit fathers into your fatherhood program. They can also encourage fathers currently enrolled in a program to maintain their participation, and even in some cases to act as guides or mentors for fatherhood program participants. And I know you all have a mentor component to what you're doing as well, so that may be another way to connect it in if you're not already offering an alumni program to nurture those guides and mentors as well. Now, one organization that's doing a great job with this is Newark Now, and they're in Newark, New Jersey. Their alumni program is called DADS, and it stands for Delta Alpha Delta Sigma. And they launched that in 2008, and it does have a very strong reentry focus. And it took the alumni program a few months to start because it required the first graduates of the fatherhood program, which had started at the same time. So they had to have a little bit of an opportunity for those dads going through the program to even be eligible as alumni. The way they have it set up is that alumni meet once per month for 2 hours on a Saturday, and the meetings keep fathers engaged in activities and promote brotherhood, which is why they selected that fraternity-like name using the letters in the Greek alphabet. It also helps the fathers around self-empowerment, and they'll have guest speakers address alumni on a variety of topics. They'll encourage fathers through motivational messages, and fathers move immediately into the alumni program as soon as they've graduated from the fatherhood program that they had just graduated. The alumni program allows the organization to maintain the support network that fathers establish during their time in the fatherhood program. And to keep them engaged, staff has alumni perform a variety of different kinds of community service work. And there are things like establishing partnerships with other agencies. They'll speak to children in schools about their personal experiences. They've painted a child care center. They've held barbecues for children with perfect attendance or on honor roll that involves them playing games with the children. They've even launched an initiative called Clean Neighborhood, where the alumni choose one of the blocks on which alumni lives to pick up garbage or weed or clean abandoned lots. And they walk neighborhood children to school on the first day of school, among a lot of other activities. The program has its own bank account, like the alumni program itself actually has its own bank account that is funded solely by donations from the alumni. So now if you think that an alumni program might be a good fit or something you'd like to explore, we actually created a free downloadable guide on how to start an alumni program, and it's again, it's free. It's on our website. If you go to fatherhood.org and go to the free resource section on our website, you will be able to download that. And it's got some great tips for things to consider as you're starting it, or even if you have one to improve it. And then there are some case studies in there as well. Another great strategy for you to look at, if you haven't already, is to partner with probation and parole. And we're fortunate to have Hannah Gibson from the Kentucky DOC with us to speak about some things they're doing to keep dads engaged post-release. So I'm going to turn it over to Hannah.
Hi, Eric. Thank you. My name is Hannah Gibson, and I'm a program administrator for the reentry branch for the Kentucky Department of Corrections. What I do is I oversee the implementation of programs in the community which are facilitated by probation and parole officers. I conduct class observations to ensure the fidelity of the program, make sure evidence-based practices are followed, and I'm basically a support system for the officers. First, before we started looking at programs, we had to look at what the need of our population was. Are they medium to high risk in criminogenic needs, such as family and marital? Do they have a support system to help them out? Do they have children, and are they medium or high risk in antisocial patterns or behaviors, and who are they associating with? Then we have to ask ourselves, do we have officers that are willing to take this collateral duty on? Do they have the passion for it? Do we have the buy-in? And do we have the time to dedicate to this? Many officers have expressed that they love teaching. They have learned from the program themselves, and they truly like connecting with the client. The goal, of course, is to reduce recidivism, but also to instill hope and help motivate clients to be inspiring fathers by giving them the tools to know how. Our barriers have been that our officers wear many hats already, and they have high caseload. If the facilitator is not passionate about the program, we are lost, and it could have the reverse effect. Luckily, we have many officers that are eager to learn, want to make a difference, and enjoy teaching. But teaching is only half the battle. Officers also have to be the motivators of the clients. Officers need to tap into those hard-to-have discussions with the clients about responsibility of being a father and how this program can help them. Getting them there can be half the battle. Showing up to class and making their own schedule can be a huge task for clients, especially if they've just been released and they're used to controlled movement in the institution or someone telling them where to be. A lot of them come out with no family support, and they come out as full-time dads right off the bat. So now child care and other priorities are an issue. So incentives we have used to battle these barriers are the clients get 90 days taken off their sentence. Those on probation can usually use the program as a sanction or an option in lieu of revocation. The classes can be counted as a report day so that the client does not have to report again to that officer. The client can be considered to go to inactive supervision where they are still on supervision but they don't have to report anymore. Or inactive supervision where they don't, administrative supervision where they don't have to report but they still have to pay some fees. Or even early termination where the judge allows the probationer to end their supervision early. The incentive I like the most is the client gets to relate and gain a rapport with the officer. A lot of times it's hard to break down that wall with the client and gain trust. You can't truly help someone if they don't trust you. And trust goes both ways, of course. The officer needs to have that rapport with the client in order to truly empathize and make time for them. The officer sees a different side of the client, and therefore bias and judgments are broken down. Officers can get extra comp time, they can get reduced caseloads, and even some of them can be full-time program facilitators. And they can have a chance to break away from those violation reports, which can weigh in on optimism. And they have a chance to truly help someone. Report days can only be so long, and one can only do so much in that short period of time. Other incentives have been working with the organizations for referrals and resources. Our clients are able to go to a private provider for the program, and they still receive 90 days off their sentence. It is still a recommendation that can be used to the judge in lieu of revocation and will still help in reducing the client's risk level. This can really be helpful when classes are provided at times when the officer can't do so. And that way the client can work with their employment schedules and other priorities that they have. And of course, the officer gains that relationship with that organization so that we can use them for other resources and other purposes to help the client. Results have been that the client has a support system. They can open up, share stories, they can express their feelings in an objective environment and get constructive feedback. Clients are appreciative and even emotional during graduation. Also, the officer benefits. They regain that empathy that they have possibly lost along the way, and they're more knowledgeable about fatherhood initiatives. Many officers have expressed that they love teaching they have learned from the program themselves, and they love having that connection with the client. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Hannah. And so again, you know, there's this opportunity with some of the probation and parole offices in order to, you know, tie in a program with what they're doing post-release and try to connect the dots as well. It makes a really nice transition from the pre to post-release. In addition to probation and parole, you can also work with your local sheriff's office to connect with dads post-release. A NOLA Dads is a great example of this. A NOLA Dads class takes place at the Day Reporting Center, which is part of the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office. And it's a program to reduce recidivism for people on probation and parole, and a place where there are classes on anger management, employment, and other education and parenting classes. The class is run by Family Services of Greater New Orleans, and I've included a link there to a nice radio piece that was featured on NPR, National Public Radio. If you'd like to hear more about it, I think it's only like a 4 or 5 minute radio piece, but it does have you know, some quotes from some fathers that were connected to the program itself, and again, it might get the creative juices going for you all as you're thinking about other partners in your area, law enforcement in particular, that may make a natural transition for these dads pre to post release, and that you can also integrate your programs and services into as, if not a requirement, maybe something that could be strongly encouraged for these fathers to participate. The final strategy that I want to share is to engage moms to encourage fathers' participation. The Allegheny Intermediate Unit in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania does a great job with this. They use NFI's Understanding Dad program, which is an 8-session program for moms to facilitate this strategy. The Understanding Dad program is designed to increase mothers' knowledge and positive attitudes toward the father and his involvement, while also increasing the communication skills associated with improving their relationship with the fathers of their children. And the first half of the program helps moms become more self-aware of things in their own family of origin that have maybe had an effect on their relationship with the dads. And they will reflect on what kind of relationship they have with their own father and how that might be affecting the relationship with the father or fathers of their children. What did their mother model in her relationships with other men, and how important it is for the father to be involved in the lives of their children as far as child outcomes and things like that. So it really helps her to think about the best interest of her children, irregardless of what the quality of the relationship is with the dad at that point. But on the second half, they really do focus on building communication skills and effective tools to be able to, you know, to interact with the father in a more healthy way. And I like to say they will learn how to speak dad, essentially, on the second half. But the Allegheny Intermediate Unit has found, as moms go through the program and learn about the other programs and services that AIU offers for dads, that they strongly encourage the men in their lives to attend the fatherhood program. And often they share, you know, examples of fathers who have joined the fatherhood programs based on the fact that the moms had encouraged them and had learned about it through the Understanding Dad program. So you may want to think about ways you can engage the significant others of the dads you're serving, both pre and post release, in order to increase the father's participation during that reentry process. So with that, we wanted to make sure we did carve out a little bit of time for some questions and answers, as this is the section that can pull some of these ideas or some things that the three of us have talked about today into something that's more relevant and valuable for your setting. So Roneen, I'm going to turn it back over to you and see if we do have any questions that come in.
Great. Thank you so much, Erik, and thank you, Jordan and Hannah. for your contributions to the presentation as well. I think it's really great to have some good on-the-ground examples of some of the strategies that Erik was presenting. I also want to just apologize again for the technical issues that we had earlier. I know I didn't quite do Erik's part justice, but I think we were able to make up for it. So thank you everyone for your patience. Quickly before we move on to the questions, one point that I would like to make that ties into the strategy that Erik just mentioned about engaging mothers in this process. For those of you who are familiar with the Healthy Marriage, Responsible Fatherhood grants out of the Department of Health and Human Services, they have seen a big push lately to incorporate mothers and co-parents into the fatherhood programs that they're funding. I think part of that is to really increase the healthy relationship component and improve the healthy relationship components of those programs. So instead of talking to just one part of the equation, bringing in the other part of that equation so that they can build those relationships together. But additionally, I think it is, to the purpose of this webinar and Erik's point, a great strategy for keeping the fathers engaged. They're not there alone dealing with this issue, but bringing other people who are involved in the relationship into it as well. So I just wanted to reinforce that a bit. So like Erik said, we're going to, we do have time now for questions. Just a reminder to everybody, the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there is a Q&A box. So you can submit a question there directed either to me or the host of the webinar, and we'll be able to see those questions, and I'll read them aloud to everyone on the webinar and direct them to whoever you'd like them directed to. And just to start, there was a question about how do you build the relationship with child support? So how do you get that started if you don't have one already? Or I know of a few agencies that I've worked with that do have a relationship, but it's not the kind where the child support office is able to make any adjustments to payments. So I don't know if that's the issue of the person who asked the question as well, but I think those are two key issues. How do you build that relationship and how can you expand on it? One thing that I can say is if you're not sure who to go to at your local child support office, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, there is a great deal of support for this at the federal level. Federal representatives representatives from the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement are great resources to use to figure out not only what the policies are in your area, but who to reach out to. So I definitely encourage you, just as a first step, if you're not sure who to go to, look up who that representative is. The Office of Child Support Enforcement is under the Department of Health and Human Services, and you can find that online. They do list where those individual regions are, who the regional contacts are, and those are great people to utilize. They work with local offices, they know those people, and they can kind of help get you started and get the ball rolling. I will also check in with Erik on this too. Have you heard anything from any of the programs you work with about successful strategies for bringing child support not only into the conversation, but into being able to support the work that they're doing once fathers are released?
Yeah, there's a couple of different approaches that have worked from some programs that I'm familiar with. And, one of the things that I know kind of created an open door for a couple of programs is that didn't really have a relationship with their local child support enforcement office or local staff in child support. And one was, it is an example, like most fatherhood programs have a session related to child support. As an example, in 24/7 Dad, I mean, there's a session in there, and also in Inside Out Dad for the pre-release and post-release programs. And we actually recommend that, maybe you just reach out and invite a child support enforcement staff person to come out and just address the fathers, as part of the fatherhood group. And oftentimes what happens is that starts a relationship between the facilitator of the program and the child support staff. And, it's something that's very easy for them to do. A lot of times they don't really mind coming out, and if they can address, even if it's just a half an hour or an hour or something, to come out to the group as a way to begin building that. And for them to see firsthand, how the fathers are responding to the program, and that there are benefits for them as well. So that's been one way to kind of start the bridge to the relationship. But another approach that actually occurred here in the Pittsburgh area was there was some local funding that a few groups came together and went after, and it was state funding. And then there was also some private foundations that they were able to get some funding to supplement this. But it was called the Fathers Collaborative, and it was focused on non-custodial fathers. And many of the fathers they were serving had dads that were, reentering from prison or from jail, and they established the different partners in the collaborative were responsible for different parts of the service delivery or the program model itself. So a Healthy Start Male Initiative program did all the case management and did the facilitation of the fatherhood groups. But then they also had Goodwill Industries came in, and they provided the job readiness piece, but they also provided the funding for the child support arrearage forgiveness piece. So they didn't even actually get the money from the local child support office, and it wasn't something that had to go through a lot of, policy changes or trying to get, the local child support office to cover the cost. What they did was they allotted certain amounts of money out of their budget as part of this Fathers Collaborative to say, we will cover up to, a few $1,000s off of the father's child support arrears if they attend up to a minimum of at least 10 out of the 12 sessions. And then they said if the fathers attended all 12 sessions, they would double the amount of the child support arrearage forgiveness. So they essentially, in some ways they kind of circumvented the whole child support enforcement office because they didn't, at least at that time, they didn't have the relationship or the child support office didn't have the ability to cover the cost of the child support arrears. And then, later on they were able to, as a result of the program getting up and running, develop a much closer relationship with child support as part of the project. But the child support office never actually covered any of the actual forgiveness for the dads. That came out of operation budgets from Goodwill. So that's another approach you can think about if you run into a wall, with the local child support office actually being able to provide the forgiveness piece. You might be able to find some other funding sources that may want to invest in that kind of a program.
Great, thank you so much, Eric. And something else that you mentioned that stood out to me I wanted to piggyback on was, I think one of the benefits I've seen from some programs is, or one of the highlights I've seen from some programs is when they have a partnership with child support, and child support representatives actually come in and have conversations with the guys. It's something that you had mentioned. I think some of the more successful conversations have been actual conversations, not just a child support professional coming in, doing a presentation and walking out, but actually being able to give the fathers in the room an opportunity to ask questions, to really get a better understanding of what's happening. Many of them may not fully understand what having a child support case means, and giving them the opportunity to really delve into that. And so at a bare minimum, I think that's a great way to engage child support and get guys interested in coming to your program because they're going to get some really useful information out of it. So thank you again, Eric, for the additional information on that. And as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the webinar, child support is a whole other issue that is worth exploring, and we're going to look into potentially adding on to this series with a webinar specifically on that, if it's possible. All right, so another question that came in was around if there are some successful strategies for engaging not just the mothers, but the families of the fathers as a way to get fathers engaged. So, some things that brought up for me when reading this question was there's a big push for mothers and or co-parents to be involved in the program, but are there any programs that have found success engaging fathers by offering other supports like daycare for their child, or at least someone who can watch the child while they're taking part in the programming, or resources for them to support their children, either whether it's school supplies or for younger children, health products, food, anything like that, as well as resources for supporting the co-parent or the mother of the child. So, I mean, I guess we'll start with Erik. I mean, but if any of the other presenters have any thoughts on this, any successful strategies you've seen where the family of the father has been engaged, and that's been a way to keep the father as part of the program?
I don't have anything off the top of my head specifically. I could probably do a little bit of research on that, but I know that there's been some good work around children of incarcerated parents. There's some specific funding that's actually, I think if you even just Google like children of incarcerated parents, you'll see, some of the programs that are focusing on that. And I know that they've done quite a bit of really good work around the family itself, and they work almost equally, if not maybe more, a little bit on the family side, because that's the inlet that they're starting with in many of these cases, is the children and the families that have the incarcerated parents. In many cases, those situations you'll find that the children might be living with grandparents or other extended family, or they may be in child welfare system or something like that. But I know that that would be one that I would recommend that maybe you just take do a Google search on and check out some of the things that they're doing, since that is really a major push and a major focus of that entire initiative is engaging the family, understanding the issues that the families are facing and providing them with support, but also connecting it with the fact that that this parent is who's incarcerated is still a major part of the the health and well-being of the family, and tries to connect the dots on both sides. So that would be one recommendation that just comes to mind.
Great, thank you. I think a really good thing is to look around your community and see, are there any programs that either are supporting children of incarcerated parents or just children in need in general, and seeing if you can partner with them to provide some additional resources. I wish I had a little bit more information on this, but I do know that one of our Young Fatherhood Mentoring grantees that's based out of Hawaii does an annual giving program where people donate supplies that are then able to be given to the families and children of the individuals that they serve. And I think that definitely is a worthwhile incentive to keep people coming back to the program, because they're not only receiving support for themselves, but they're receiving support for their families as well. One strategy that has come up is about co-location. There are many times some of the barriers to participating in these programs are my probation appointments in one part of the city, my fatherhood classes in another part of the city. I have to report for treatment in another part, and it makes it very difficult when you have to travel to lots of different parts, lots of different areas, especially if transportation itself is an issue. I actually want to pose a question to Hannah. Your program is run by the probation and parole officers. They're actually facilitating the curriculum, which I think makes, well, one, I wanted to ask, does this make it a smoother process for fathers in that they can arrive for a probation appointment as well as their fatherhood workshop? But then also, are there other services that you have developed relationships with other service providers where they're available either at your site, or you're able to provide courses at their site, or anything around co-locating services that you felt has been successful?
Right. You know, a lot of times it's helpful to have it at the parole office. I know sometimes they don't want to go to the parole office, but it can be helpful because they know where it is, they know how to get there, and then, like I said, it can be considered a report day. We also do classes at the halfway houses. You know, they're in the halfway house, they have jobs maybe or this or that, but there you have a captive audience. They don't have to go anywhere, and they can complete the class before getting out when they have all those other obstacles in the community. We also, when we had our grant with the Second Chance Act, we provided bus tickets. And, of course, I'm in Louisville, so we have a lot of different resources to help with transportation that maybe the rural counties don't have. But we did provide bus tickets. So that's all I can think of right this second. Did I answer the question here?
I think you did, yeah, thank you. That was great. I think, obviously, if there's any support that you can give around transportation is obviously very helpful. I think the piece about the halfway houses is really key. I want to just make a note really quick, as I just remembered, I posted in the chat box a few links to different resources, either ones that were mentioned by the presenters or resources that our website at the Justice Center provides. There is some information on there about housing and reentry and some information about employment and reentry. So I definitely encourage you to check those out to support these efforts. I think another question that has come up that I think, Hannah, could go out to you is around partnering with probation and parole. And I know this is something we talked about when prepping for the webinar. It's really amazing that you're working in a program where the probation and parole officers are so invested in the fatherhood program. They're actually facilitating the courses. The majority of the programs we work with are nonprofit agencies where we encourage them to build strong partnerships with probation and parole to support their work so they can support each other's work. Every jurisdiction is different, as we know. Every state has its own guidelines, standards, and culture. But generally speaking, what would you advise a nonprofit program that's trying to get their foot in the door to probation and parole to get their support in keeping fathers engaged in their programs? Any advice that you could give them?
Well, we have council or reentry task force meetings that we have around the state. So, and they're monthly. Some of them are quarterly. We go there. We meet with the nonprofit organizations. We collaborate with them. We gain a relationship with them. And that's where we're able to say, okay, you know what, what's your email? I'm going to refer this guy to you. This guy needs you. So having those meetings is key, where when I first started back in the day, an offender would ask me a question and I had no answer for him. So, but now with these meetings, I can go there and I have this guy, okay, he's a father, he needs your help. Can you provide these classes or can you do this? And we're able to collaborate and make that happen. So, but just reaching out to the officers, the culture is definitely changing from what it used to be. All of our officers want to do what they can to help. So just reaching out to them and starting these task forces, I think, would be a really good way to go.
Great, thank you so much. I have a question that I think would be good for Jordan. When talking about employment services and using employment as a way, or utilizing employment as a way to keep fathers engaged in the programming, let's say you do have a father that is just so focused on employment they don't see either they don't see the value or they believe they need to focus their energies on employment as opposed to the actual fatherhood curriculum, the fatherhood workshops, and taking part in those. How do you tend to address that in your program, or have you seen any successful strategies in working with guys who have trouble either prioritizing or seeing the value in that fatherhood piece?
Yeah, I just try to encourage the father. I go back to my personal beliefs. I believe that family is number one. Well, God's number one, then family second. And I try to advise the father that there's a delicate balance that you need to look at. And I kind of try to encourage them I think programs, fathering programs, anything to be a better father is something that I really encourage. You guys already know, we have a fathering issue in America. A lot of the fathers are locked up behind bars, and it hurts our society. It hurts the kids. It hurts the families. There's a lack of discipline and leadership in homes, and I feel that having these parenting classes is very important. I try to work with my employees if they have classes that they need to do. I give them the day off. I help them. Try to prioritize better. I just tell them work's going to be there. And you just need to really focus if need be. If this is something that is required of them to do, I encourage them to do that.
Great, thank you so much. I know something else that I've experienced with some programs is a big part of fatherhood programs is talking about building healthier relationships and stronger relationships. And so one thing that I've seen some programs do is part of their messaging around taking part in the program is that those workshops will benefit your job search. It will benefit your success in the workforce. Healthy relationships means healthy relationships with anyone, not just your co-parent and not just your family members. And so it can apply to how you interact with supervisors, bosses, other employees, coworkers, that sort of thing. So it's another thing to think about. I think one of the glaring issues that stands out despite all of these strategies is what if I just can't get them to come in after release, right? What if I can't get them either can't get them on the phone or they just haven't shown up? And I think a big piece of that is, at least for those individuals who are working in facilities where this is possible, is building that relationship pre-release. And one thing that Erik had mentioned was around the alumni communities. There is one of our grantees, another Second Chance Act grantee, who has a Young Fatherhood grant from FY14, is the Ridge Project in Ohio. They took part in our webinar, the last webinar we did on engaging families, and they actually have an alumni community that's inside the prisons that they work in. These are individuals who may have longer sentences, but they've gone through the program, and they provide support to the fathers that enter the program, that are new to entering the program while incarcerated. And they're able to support each other on the inside, and then Ridge Project staff are able to connect them to alumni once they're released as well. So building those really strong relationships on the inside is definitely, I think, a big part of of ensuring that they can take part, or ensuring that they'll re-engage, I guess, when they get released. I want to throw this to Erik for a moment. Any other examples or strategies that you've seen be successful, or just emerging practices or attempts, because I know that this happens to be the wall that we come up against a lot, in just getting them to show up for the first day, right? Just after they get released, whether it's jail or prison, whether you have the opportunity to really build that strong relationship or you were only able to meet with them a few times before they were released. Anything that you've identified that might be helpful to the folks on the line around getting someone to show up on that first day?
Well, I mean, in general, when you're trying to recruit dads on the post-release side, so once they're out in the community, I mean, the analogy is it's like, trying to herd cats. It's like a real challenge. So, some of the, the broader-based kind of strategies, the themes that I've seen work, number one is if you can, go to where the dads are. Don't wait for them to come to you. If you can connect with them and think about it like in incremental steps. Maybe they're not at the point where they're ready to jump in, head first into a 12-session group-based fatherhood program if it's presented that way. But to find, creative ways to connect with these guys out in the community in places where you might find them. And, some of those locations, I mean, there's, the the president has done this big thing with the barbershops. Even prior to that initiative, that we had some partners that were doing things in barbershops. They were going out to, different kinds of sporting and activity events to connect with the dads. There was one program in Virginia that couldn't get dads to come to their fatherhood program, and they learned about a midnight basketball tournament league that when they talked to the people who were coordinating that league, that they found that they were having problems with these men who were having all these off-the-court issues and in and out of jail and having all these kinds of problems. So what they did was they partnered and they came up with a slogan that said, the slogan was, no workshop, no jump shot. And they made that a requirement, that they had to attend a portion of a 24/7 dad program before they were able to participate in the actual basketball league for, that week. And so, sometimes it's just knowing your community and thinking, very creatively about how you can intersect with these men. And it's always about relationships. And that's why, again, the alumni approach is very key to that, because, it's establishing relationships. And then as these fathers graduate and they stay a part of this alumni program, they essentially become ambassadors, and they become your connectors for the other dads who may be being released, to encourage them and to, be a role model as well, but be that relational catalyst that can engage them in those services once they get out, and that they've got a kind of building a new peer network, which is a really important dynamic, as you all know, as they're coming out. But it's also important for recruitment of these dads to get them to, to the first session, if it's a session, or, some kind of a workshop or activity, whatever your program, however it's structured. It's important to do that. And the other thing I would say too, that I found the most successful programs at getting dads into their programs are ones that they understand their target audience. I mean, they will, talk to them in informal settings. They'll connect with them, just to chat with them and find out, what are your wants and needs, and not just needs, but wants, because some dads define those differently, and what we may think is a need might be a want, and vice versa. But the more that you can connect something like what we talked about in the first part of our webinar today, whether it's a way to help them get through child support arrearage issues, or access and visitation issues, or employment issues, or housing issues, and you can integrate or embed your fatherhood program into those kinds of support services and say, look, we are here for you, we want to help in order to unlock that. It may be a mandate or a requirement initially, but once those fathers get into these programs, what we find is that they may be kicking and screaming in the first maybe session or two, but as they connect with it and the facilitator is able to draw out and make it relevant and allow the issues to start having relevance for them, the fathers actually then want to come to the remaining sessions. There's a program down in Bay Minette, Alabama that runs our 24/7 Dad AM program, which is 12 sessions, but then they also run our 24/7 Dad PM program, which is another 12 sessions. Those fathers are mandated by the local court, the local judge, to go to AM, but the PM is completely voluntary, and the program has shared with us that they have a 97% retention rate from AM to PM. So it just, again, it just goes to show you, if you can get them in there, get them into that first one, and sometimes it may be through something that's more almost like a requirement, that they will then see for themselves the value of the program and want to continue to, to be a part of it.
And if I could just add one thing, I think you probably already went over this, but one thing I used to do when I was an officer is during home visits, really connecting with the families, because in reality, they're going to listen to their family members a lot more than the parole officer. But, you know, just telling the mother or, you know, the child's mother, here, this program is available. If you can convince him to come, you know, that would be great. And a lot of times they would show up to class and say, my mom is making me come, or so-and-so is making me come. And one thing Kentucky has done is we have meetings, and they're called with the families of the incarcerated. And we tell them about these programs, which a lot of times they're like, we had no idea that they could do these. So that's, and I think somebody already touched on that, but I just wanted to express that. I think that's a really good route to take too.
Thanks, Hannah, and thank you, Eric, both for your comments. I think, Hannah, to your point, I think that is a really valuable strategy. If you're educating the community about your program and specifically focusing on family members in the community, oftentimes these fathers will listen to their families. You know, they'll listen to whether it's their co-parent, their parents, their grandparents, or you know, whoever else is involved in their lives. They definitely are influencers who could support that. So thank you very much for that. Just looking to see if there are any more questions before we wrap up. We're almost at time, but I'll just double check to see if there was anyone else, or if you have had a lingering question and you haven't put it into the chat box yet, I encourage you to do so. So we're just going to go check that chat box really quick. And it looks like we may be good on the Q&A front. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating today, for all your questions, and thank you to our presenters. This concludes the webinar for today. A special thank you to Erik Vecere, Jordan Jeske, and Hannah Gibson for taking the time to present today, and thank you to everyone who joined. We will be emailing a link to the recording of this presentation as well as the PDF of the PowerPoint slides used in the presentation in the coming weeks. We'll also be sending out a survey with those links, so we definitely want to get your feedback on how the webinar went today, what you thought was useful and informative, and where you think it can be improved to help improve our future webinars. The links to the presentation, the recording of the presentation and the PDF will also be made available on the National Reentry Resource Center's website. That's at csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC. I definitely encourage all of you to sign up for the newsletter I mentioned before. It'll give you plenty of updates on other webinars pertaining to a wide variety of topics in the realms of reentry and behavioral health. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you.